Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's general Q&A. We have a ram-packed bunch of JMods on this week's Q&A, so why don't we say hello to everyone? I'm your host, Mod Sarnie, and we are joined by Mod Ayiza. How you doing?
Hello. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm alright, thank you. Mod Kieren, how's it going?
Yo, you alright?
Not bad. Mod Bruno.
Hello.
Hello. And Mod Tide.
Hello there.
Excellent. How has everybody's week been? We'll start with you, Ayiza. How's it been?
Yeah, overall pretty good. It's been an interesting week because, well, as many people in this chat probably know, I've been helping out supporting the PvP arena. So I've had some wonderful comments sent my way and some wonderful posts being made. So that was interesting. Aside from that, though, I've actually been working on some pretty good long-term strategy pieces, which I'm excited to share in the very near future. Yeah, outside of that, life's been good. It's very warm at the moment, though, and in order to maintain the green screen, I've had to close my curtains, which means there's no breeze, and I'm struggling to stay in this seat.
I mean, well, hopefully we can keep you for the full hour in this heat.
We'll
Hopefully
see.
you don't
I
melt
might
too
slide
much.
underneath the desk as I slip down.
Mod Kieren, how's it going? How are you battling the heat today?
Oh man, I wouldn't be British if I didn't also complain about the heat. So, no aircon before anyone comments. We just don't have aircon in the UK for some reason. But no, it's not too shabby. I've got a good fan setup going on in here. It's pretty bearable. But yeah, it's been a good week. Busy. A lot of discussions on the new raid, which is always one of my favorite things to be talking about. So excited for players to getting their hands on that down the line.
Yeah, things are really ramping up behind the scenes. It's really nice. We saw some bits today, which was nice and interesting. No, it's not that great. Yeah, Mod Bruno, how are you?
Yeah, I've been good. Last week I was off for pretty much all week, moving to my new house, so it's nice to be back. It's been a pretty smooth week, so I'm not complaining. And the heat isn't too bad because I've got like a big fan next to me. Yeah, I'm doing good.
I just realised I might have been muted that last part. It said it was unmuted, but apparently
You were, yeah.
Sorry, Kieren. I was talking about the whole AC stuff, and how it's just not a thing here. But no, I was really blanking you. I'm sorry. Oh, that's it. All right, Mod Tired, and you. How has your week been?
Week's going great. It's nice and hot. I've had to shut my blind because otherwise my camera would have made me a bit too bright. So that's shut for now. So no breeze for me there. But it's been going pretty well. We'll continue and work on the enhanced client. Features coming along really well. Can't wait for you to see it. It'll be good.
Yeah, shouldn't be too far away now. So awesome stuff from you all. All right, before we get into the general Q&A, let's go through some announcements. First up, we have !game update. As always, we've listened to your feedback and added some quality of life updates to Giants Foundry. You can find all of the changes on our game update news post. Rest in peace, that plant pot in the Gnome Stronghold. !game modes, have your say on the future of old school RuneScape. I don't know what's going on with my tech today. It is it's fighting up.
You good?
Have your say. Yeah, we're good. I hope. Have your say on the future of old school RuneScape. Tell us your thoughts on different game modes, their frequency, and what types of game modes you want us to explore. !PvP, our dedicated PvP team will be moving on to reworking the wilderness bosses. But what's next for PvP? Well, that's where you come in. We'd like your help to shape the future of PvP in old school RuneScape. We really want to gain a better understanding of what you think and what we should focus our efforts on. So use !PvP for that. And finally, if you missed last week's stream, we have a handy transcript ready so you can catch up with transcript. All right. With that out of the way, I suppose we should get straight into the questions. I know we've got some player-created content for the end, but let's kick off with the first question from Rickness666. They ask, since the collection log was added to the clan broadcast system, I've noticed a lot more people have been interested in the collection log hunting. Can collection log slots be added to the high scores?
I swear this has come up before. I have no idea why we would say no to it, unless there's something I'm unaware of, but I'd certainly love to have a high score, which is like the total number of slots that you've got. Sounds good.
I think the biggest reason to probably say no, though it isn't that big of a one, is if someone's like top 100 collection log, you can assume that they're a pretty wealthy, high-level individual, because, you know, they've got lots of things collected. And I think that was like the biggest thing we would not want to do it for. But I don't really mind it. I think it would be nice. People like to compete with these sort of things, so why not?
Yeah, boss kill count already kind of does that.
Mm.
It's a legitimate point, I suppose. But also, I guess in essence that just because two people are 500 on their slots, one could still be technically ahead of somebody else because they've got harder to obtain things. But that aside, I don't think that's a big deal. I think it's still worth it.
Yeah, so there you go. Maybe something for the future. Ferocia27 asked, with how frequent use of Prossy armor is, are there any plans to add another tier or perhaps to continue the Slug Menace storyline?
If it's already good, why do you need an upgrade? But in all seriousness, I know this is one of the storylines that people have talked about being interested in us doing a follow-up to that is different to how RuneScape followed up this quest, because I don't believe that quest was that popular even at the time. But as with any quest storyline, there's so many storylines that we could possibly look at. Certainly, if we do look to follow up a quest series, we'll probably be looking to the player base for like surveys, so like which quest lines do you want to be looked at? I think we already have asked some of that previously. We might have some info on that. But yeah, right now there's no current plans.
With the rewards, you don't necessarily have to be another tier armor. It could be another slot.
Or it could be a different combat style, like a magic proselyte. I don't think there's anything like that. So yeah, that'd be cool. It'd be really useful for like bursting, things like dust devils and that sort of stuff where you don't need magic accuracy. But yeah, it wouldn't work. The quest side of it wouldn't work for Oldschool if it went the same way, because I think they went with like some dungeoneering twist, didn't they? I think it was a quest called Salt in the Wound where it had like a dungeoneering twist to it. So that wouldn't work for us, but we've always like altered the way that game works for us, where it be things with things like Dragon Slayer 2 or Monkey Madness 2. So yeah, would be cool.
Yeah, from the quest porting survey itself, I've just pulled up the results, and there was no slug-related ones. Penguins, dwarves, Morguthic Sleeps, of course, and the Goblin storyline. So yeah, not the slug one though. So who knows? Yeah, maybe we can do something properly old school to it. All right. Question 3 we have from Murder Pura. Why did Jagex change the polling process to become more about validation at the end of development rather than greenlighting at the beginning of development? Updates fail polls when not communicated properly. Can you go into more detail about why updates are being polled so late into development?
Well, I don't mind taking on this one. I am a guest today, after all. I'd say that like we haven't, and if we have, it's not been intentional. There's been a few updates that we definitely have looked at putting the poll out later than we would have liked, just because of timing and resource constraints more than anything. But I personally felt, at least at the start of the year, we were being really, really like ahead of the designs being finalized when it came to polling, or at least bringing out the initial blogs. If anything, it's probably the case of that we're doing a lot more in terms of like feedback iterations back and forth and making sure that the final design is in a really good place before we end up then polling, which does by association just end up meaning that we are polling at a point where we've already developed a fair bit of stuff. But anyway, it's not really meant to be an intentional thing. And as we look towards the roadmap for the next half of this year, it's something that we're especially going to be considerate of. And I don't want it to be the case. I'd rather that we're able to poll much earlier, much sooner. But it is difficult because a lot of the times poll questions don't sit very well feedback-wise before they go in-game to be voted on if there isn't a solid design behind it. So it's a bit of a catch-22. We can't have poll questions with a bad design, but we can't have a good design without having spent some time on it. So, yeah. We are mindful of it, though, and it's not intentional.
It's not good for us either, because, you know, we're all the incentive to do it earlier, because it's not comfortable for any developer either, knowing, like, you're working on something that isn't quite through a poll yet. Generally, we're pretty confident. I think, you know, we tend to have a pretty good read. Certainly, if you use Giants Foundry as an example, it was obviously quite a long way through development by the time we pulled it. But we know generally that the frustrations with most poll questions are about rewards, which are relatively easy to change. We know the content's probably going to be all right at a basic level, as a theme, as a concept.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, we've getting conversations out early. We've had, like, Giants Foundry, for example, was mentioned in a Gazette months and months and months before we actually had a fully like put together blog about it. So we already had that time to kind of, like, as Kieren said, gauge player opinions and get a sense for, okay, is this going to be really controversial, or is it likely to pass as long as we hit the marks right in terms of the feedback? So yeah, kind of we do have a lot more validation before polling than we did before, but that also then means the poll comes later. So
yeah, I think with everything we're doing as well, like game jams and stuff, we've got a lot more time to explore ideas and stuff and get that to you guys earlier, which is going to be a good thing. So yeah, all good. Thank you, guys. Logan J. Fisher asked, what does the future of restricted polls look like? There was some pretty significant backlash after this last one, and people, myself included, have some very valid concerns about them.
I was muted for a while. I mean,
You go, Ayiza.
I'll take this one again, and I mean, I'm going to give a really safe answer on this one. The future of restricted polls doesn't look like anything right now. We're still experimenting, so it's difficult to say exactly how they may end up. It may be that we don't even do them anymore. I don't think that will be the case, because I'm pretty confident, at least, that there are certain circumstances that would allow for restricted polling for the likes of PVM and skilling. But we've really just been testing the waters. The first stage was with some Ironmen things, some group Ironmen. We've now obviously tried it with PvP. We've seen the feedback that, you know, has obviously been there regarding that, which we'll take into account, and that will help shape whatever future restricted polling may be. In terms of, like, the backlash, obviously, again, it's something that we'll consider. But ultimately, if we feel like what we're doing is for the best interest of the game, then I'm not okay with dealing with the backlash, because I'd rather that there wouldn't be any and that everyone would be as happy as possible. But we're never all going to agree on everything all the time. So I'm not going to say that backlash would be a reason for us to step down and no longer do them. It's just that we'll take into account the feedback that we got and look to see how we can avoid that if we do continue with restricted polling. And in terms of valid concerns and such, that's something that we'd like to dig into a little bit more as well. And I imagine that as we continue iterating with this and polling as a whole, that we'll be looking to involve the community to kind of, like, gather thoughts, feedback, and really work on it together. I realize us as the old school team currently are essentially leading the charge on that, and we haven't really involved anyone from the community to kind of, like, gather thoughts, opinions, and stuff. So they're all bits that we will be doing. The most recent ones were really just testing the waters and just seeing how they fared and how they were kind of, like, received. So
yeah, I would simplify almost as well. Take a step back from polls in of themselves and say, what I want to do is I want to deliver content for all of our players, for all of our different communities, and make sure that they're getting the attention they deserve. content-wise. And the pull system is obviously a big part of how we've developed since all the way back to 2013. And it's had subtle tweaks with how we sort of word questions and how we do blogs, but broadly it's been the 75% system since 2013. I believe from our sort of annual surveys, the community does, of course, think polling is really important to Oldschool. But there's also quite a lot of players who said in the same survey they don't think the current system is perfect. It could do with some tweaks and improvements. Whether we all agree on what improvements it needs is a question yet to be answered. But I'd certainly be interested to see what people think on how would you like polling to work such that it can be effective.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. All right, to come away from polling for a second, we've got a question from Raid's Monkey Ideas. Could we possibly see a fossil island expansion in the form of a new island in the vicinity where we're able to fight skeletal dinosaurs / dragonkin experiments? Would be interested in a combat agility hybrid.
Ooh, this sounds like a really nice idea, and you could probably incorporate the use of fossils into these as well. To maybe, like, you have to collectively put together a certain amount of fossils to unlock a new part of the area, or a new area of the island, or something like that, to give it just a nice use.
Yeah, I want to see how it's done and how it's designed. I'm sure there's someone out there that's seen this question and wants them and is going to make a new island mock-up now, because I always love seeing them on Reddit. All right, the next question we have is from Odin. They say, currently dungeons are basically just another field with a bunch of grouped mobs. Have you ever considered adding some form of linear dungeon to the game? Linear dungeons could generate group play and interesting dungeon content.
I would love to do some sort of, proper MMO-like dungeon experience in Oldschool. 100%. You're right, our dungeons, a lot of them are quite old, right? They're just rooms with monsters in them. But if you go all the way back to things like Taverley Dungeon, that dungeon looks quite a lot different to how, the Slayer Dungeon under Thriftiness looks or whatever. Dungeons have largely ended up becoming Slayer dungeons because they're just rooms with monsters in to kill for your Slayer task. I like that Taverley sort of, it's old, it shows that, but it still had those little bits of storytelling elements. And we saw that really get developed a bit further as an idea with Forthus Dungeon a few years ago. I think people really, really liked that update when it came out. It didn't quite go this far, but it really did start to push on some of these ideas. And I would like to use this sort of concept to present proper sort of group play content that's available to players that aren't nearly at max combat. People who have got level 60s having group content you can go and do. I think that'd be really cool.
I agree. I think you probably listened to me enough as it is, Kieren, how they gone about mid-level dungeons and raids and having them scalable to account for all kind of players. It's if there was one thing nice that I could do for the game without anyone having to veto it, it would definitely be that. I think it's a really missed opportunity and a huge amount of potential. Even if they are just really small scale raids, with 2 or 3 bosses that aren't much more difficult than the likes of Obor or what's the other one's name? Bro Fighter, that kind of level, and then scaling up.
It just feels just like a glaring gap in a type of content that would very well fit into this game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just hearing we need more giant bosses. That's what I'm hearing from Ayiza. So, Engineered Muffin asked, is the team happy with the place that the Ancient Crystal sits in the Rev Caves? Baldy Slayer might be a good place to have this drop, in my opinion. Either in the Laren's chest or a rare drop from Slayer monsters.
Sounds like an Ironman that wants to teleport in their player-owned house, if you ask me. They are quite restricting though, right? For Ironmen, it is quite difficult, I'd imagine, to get a hold of all of them. But I'm not experienced enough really on whether or how much of a problem that is. So I won't say anything because I've already been on Reddit's bad books enough this week.
I think they're pretty rare, but then again, there's definitely like alternatives to having a obelisk in your house, and it really does feel just like an Ironman problem because to build the entire obelisk, it's like what 600k in ancient crystals. So I'm not totally inclined to changing it, but yeah, feels like just an Ironman problem.
Alright, thank you guys. RJM007 asked, any possibilities of adding something to do with extra Hespori seeds? I do Hespori on a regular basis, but still have years worth of seeds.
I've thought about this before.
Special seed pack?
Go on, Todd. Sorry.
Sorry. I was suggesting that. What about a special type of seed pack, which gives you much more seeds, better seeds?
Yeah, I don't mind that. The spirits tree seeds do the same thing. Where if you get a spirit seed, you can just trade it in for like I think it's like the highest level seed pack. Maybe not the highest level for a Hespori seed, but maybe like a mid level or something would be a nice like way to get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
I want to do more seeds equals harder Hespori fight. So rather than planting one, you can choose to plant like up to 10 or something at once. Use them up faster, get a harder fight, so that you know the max players, as soon as you're high enough combat with better weapons, Hespori is like a 40-50 second fight. You just rinse it. And based on it being a harder fight, the loot can scale and offer better chances at the bottomless bucket as well to account for how many seeds you're using. You have to balance it right. I don't want to just crush the price of that item at the same time, but that might be quite an easy way to do it, because even on the dev side, it's not trivial, but you're not necessarily looking at a huge amount of additions to the boss. Just make it scale up a little bit better for the higher level players, and maybe add some basic mechanic or something. I think that would be a cool way to do it.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it does. I was half waiting for Kieren to say something like the Jag challenges and end up with just 10 Hesporis at once on you. So
yeah, honestly, you should be fine because it only does like, well, if you get back to back vine like stuck, then you got to be screwed. But the boss itself doesn't do that much damage. You just pray one sail. But yeah, we might have to then balance the drops because you wouldn't want like 100 Chrono seeds from a 10 seed Hespori. That feels like a bit too much.
all right, thank you guys. Maybe you'll see hardcore Hespori coming soon. All right. Buzzer beat 911 asks, in Giants Foundry, when adding items to the Crucible, can the add 5 and add 10 options always appear instead of only when that number of items are in your inventory? Currently, the add all and add X options use different keyboard numbers depending on how many items are in your inventory, which is quite annoying.
So it's, you press on the Crucible, you go to hit 4, and suddenly that's the wrong option on your keyboard. Because it's trying to be smart, I guess, and not give you the add 10 options if you don't have 10. But in turn, it just ruins that kind of, what's the term? You know exactly where it is, that you built in sort of rhythm. That's definitely not the term.
Muscle
but you know
memory?
What I mean.
Muscle memory.
Muscle memory. Thank you. Saved me.
Okay.
I like
muscle
built-in
memory is
rhythm
ruined
better.
by changing. Built-in rhythm. Yes, we're gonna change the world with that. It seems reasonable, right? Just to make this change.
Well, what I'd like to see on
Yeah.
the Crucible is like an add previous option where I take it from your bank since it's right next to it.
I know there have been a couple of comments about all inventory, but I know there was when I was speaking to Mod Dylan, from what I remember, is that we'd have to work out the logic of what is classed as important. Like, because if you've got like, X amount of bars, X amount of two types of bars, and then you've got like 2 plate bodies and a battle axe or whatever. What priority does that take them in? So that was something to work out. But yeah, definitely something we can look into though. All right. Arikai asks, could we use the clue scroll rewards for the Giants Foundry, like trimmed and heraldic? This would allow for a sync for these items other than Alkin.
Sounds fair.
Trimmed could also be. You could also make it so trimmed gives you extra bars. For instance, gold trim could give you a gold bar, or if it's used in there. Who knows?
You get gold trim swords.
Problem is, you can't use gold bars.
Yeah, I know, that's the problem.
That would
It
make
could be-
a
it could
very
be a
weak
special extent.
blade guide. You're going to reduce
The
the
thing is,
quality,
yeah.
reduce the XP, and
Yeah.
Kovac is not going to be happy.
Yeah, maybe you actually
I mean-
less bars.
I would love to see the clue scroll versions of these equipments hold better values, right? Like, they've lost that value. There's so many of them in the game. How can we make them more valuable? Maybe they have XP buffs to the if you use a trimmed piece of armor in the Crucible or gold trimmed version, you get an XP buff for that sword, so you encourage people to buy it. Like, I don't know if that's the right thing to do, but I'd love to find a sync for these items.
Awesome. All right, good stuff. Right. Cybit asks, any thoughts on making crystal tools corruptible? I've been playing a lot of Guardians of the Rift lately, and it's just sad seeing my crystal pickaxe go unused because of how fast the charges go.
Not gonna lie, not a huge fan of how many things you need crystal shards for. Like, maybe that's just solvable with balancing tweaks, right? But I think when you think about how many crystal shards you're going to want, maybe you want to make some potions. Maybe you want to, charge up your crystal armor. Maybe you want to charge up your crystal tools. You got to use seeds. You got to use shards to make them in the first place. It just adds up so fast, and getting shards is pretty laborious. And really, what I come back to is almost you've earned this access to Prifdinous. You've done the hard work. You've finally got this crystal tool seed, and you're still stuck needing to get endless amounts of shards to get the benefit out of it. So that's my general feeling on shards themselves. So, like, I'd maybe like to revisit them as an entirety and in terms of like their balancing, or find a better way to give you better sources of them. So I'm kind of for corrupted, but it doesn't really solve that problem entirely, because corrupting's expensive, right? You need to get 1,000 shards or however many we set it at. So I'd like to review this stuff, because it does feel to some degree like it ends up being tedious rather than fun, and I'd like to make that better.
All right, awesome stuff. Thank you very much, Kieren. Now from Prifdinous to PvP, Likes League ask, I think the community understands that you think reinforcing the predator versus prey dynamic is good. Can you tell us why? Clearly, a lot of the community doesn't like it, and fundamentally, a lot of the community votes no to content they don't like, which is the reason the polls exist. Why not, for instance, replace non-PvP incentives in the wilderness with PvP incentives so that you still get the predator versus prey dynamic, but all parties involved are there because they like PvP?
I think part of the issue with this is that not everyone does like PvP, and that will just cause people who don't like PvP to still do it anyway, but maybe rig it like they have done previously in things like Bounty Hunter, where we'll then end up with a system which is very strong if it's rigged, but it's fair if it's not rigged. And we unfortunately can't really have that because people will rig it, is my understanding for this question.
Yeah, perhaps. I think I'm looking at it from the perspective of, let's take out everything that isn't PvP related within the wilderness and make everything PvP related within the wilderness. And I guess that's where you got your rigging part from, Bruno, is that if we did that, it would be rigged. But it's like, we haven't really looked to push the whole predator versus prey dynamic that hugely within the wilderness recently, at least not in the sense of like quote unquote forced, right? I understand that black chins are obviously a thing and they give you the best experience if you're not interrupted, but those were implemented quite literal years ago. I personally wouldn't be opposed to looking at changing those either if it meant that that sentiment was removed. And then the other thing was the Wilderness Chaos Altar. You don't really need to use the Wilderness Chaos Altar unless you want to save money, and yes, it's faster, but Gilded Altars still exist. It was meant to be balanced around that ethos anyway. So I think ultimately the whole predator versus prey dynamic, it is good as long as the foundations that it's built upon are also good, and that's what we've been really trying to focus on recently. You know, we've like introduced the prevent you from being able to get skulled options so that there's no fear of skull tricking. You can always fight back with safety, knowing that it's quite literally impossible for you to skull if you don't have one whilst that's enabled. We introduced the PJ timer to prevent you being attacked by multiple people in singles. We also then changed like the rev caves from multi to single plus to again favor the solo player and make that like the battleground a little bit more fair or even, so that for both sides. And our next kind of like initiatives that we're looking towards are to try and bring people that want to PvP into PvP. The whole idea behind the PvP arena was, let's have some rewards that are exclusive for PvP. And I mean, yes, of course, that helps those that don't, you know, it's a negative to those that don't PvP because it's going to mean that you could potentially get killed easier. But the premise of it was PvP rewards from PvP content that are for PvP only, so then people can practice PvP to get them and then go out and use them in PvP situations to then start getting better and having that enjoyment and slowly building the community up that way. Outside of that, the predator versus prey dynamic is pretty much necessary for the economy of the wilderness. Without it, there just aren't enough people. You know, if we have a small PvP community, then letting them fight upon themselves when there are hundreds of worlds now that can spread out non-PvPers and such, or just PvPers as well, obviously isn't great. So the alternative is to get more people into the wilderness. Our incentives for that now are less around the skilling side of things, and it's more about monetary gain, and they'll look to be on par with other money makers within the game so that you don't have to go there, but if you want to, then you can, and you can still make good money knowing that you're going to be susceptible to being attacked. I think if fundamentally a lot of the community don't like that aspect, then I know I'm going to get shot down for this. I can feel it already, but just don't go there. There's nothing that makes you go there apart from currently there's the dragon pickaxe, and we're aware of obviously some of the other rewards from wilderness bosses, but we've already said before that we're going to look at removing the dragon pickaxe, and for the rings that the bosses drop, maybe we can look at alternatives for those as well. But regardless of what happens, even if we didn't look at predator versus prey and we were just looking at predator versus predator, if we added a new boss into the wilderness and it was meant to be just for PvPers, someone who doesn't PvP is probably still going to want to go and kill that. So regardless of how we look at our design, that is always going to be there as a fundamental. People that want to look at collection log slots, that want to go for pet hunters, that maybe want to get the item just because it's cool. That is always going to exist, even if we are trying to focus on PvP versus, you know, player versus player rather than player versus prey. So I don't know what else to say other than, if you don't like predator versus prey, don't go to the wilderness, because you are prey unless you're going in there as a predator. Simple as that. It's not something that we're going to look to change, because that is a core of old school. PvP is essentially what the game was built upon. And yes, we've neglected it for years, but we're looking to try and fix that now after years of looking at PVM and skilling and quests and everything else. So it's not going anywhere. We are very mindful, though, that there's a large portion of players that don't like the wilderness. So that's where we're going to make sure that anything we do add in there it's only really incentivizing those that want to go, and it's not going to make you feel like you're forced to go in. And if you still feel like you're forced to go in, then maybe start thinking about being prepared to go into the wilderness, knowing that you might go into a fight. I said in a previous stream, like, you wouldn't go to the Inferno and expect to defeat the Inferno if you've not even been able to, I don't know, you obviously have to get your fire cape first, right? You have to learn, you have to get good at the game in order to be able to beat Zook. It's the exact same for PvP. You can't go into a PvP zone and expect to not be a prey and absolutely trashed on if, one, you're not geared up properly, and two, you're not prepared on a mental level or a skill level. So yeah, hopefully as we continue working on Wilderness and as we start bringing other things into there that aren't as incentivized for those that feel like they have to get forced into there for items, maybe, just maybe, that mindset can shift to, okay, I'm going to make really good money even if I'm not in the most efficient setup, so then I can fight back, and now I'm not so much of a prey. I'm maybe like a little bit of a prey in disguise kind of thing. I realize I rambled a lot there. I hope it made sense. Someone else can clarify some of the things if they feel like it. But that's my bit on it.
Just gonna say, on the topic of like being forced to and such, I think it comes down to like the balancing being really right. And I'd hold our hands up and say, I don't think it is right across some of the places right now. I mean, you mentioned the Dragon Pick is right, is one reason why people, particularly Ironmen, will feel very forced to go there, because it's such a clear upgrade to everything else. And then I think about things like the Chaos Altar. It's just, I think you call it out as an example as well, Ayiza, but the Chaos Altar is so much better. It's not just an option, because it is such a vast upgrade that it's, even if you detest PvP and have no interest in fighting back, even if you count the fact you're going to lose 30% of your bones if you're bad, it's still better. And thus those players, I think, feel like they're being put in a situation where it's like, it is the right choice, but they'll not enjoy it at the same time. So you have players that are being directed to do stuff that they don't like, but it's because it's so good. Now, that's not to say we can't solve this sort of stuff, right? In future, when it comes to how much golden hour a boss is, or how much loot you get from things, or how much XP even, is that if it's that bit closer, it's then a valid option. If Gilded Altar wasn't like, basically 3 times better than anything else, and it was, it's that gap is less, then you do have a bit more of a trade-off to say, okay, actually, I really don't like the PvP situation. I will go and train prayer at Gilded Altar. I don't want to focus too much on that example, but I think we can do better and get these things in the right place such that you're not forced. I saw a suggestion from Jakey in the chat before, like, have a 5 black chin spot outside the wilderness, because you still have that upgrade of a 6 spot in the wilderness. Like, stuff that narrows the gap a little bit so that there is that choice again. And we can look at boss money in a similar sense, right? Outside the wilderness, maybe you can get 5 million an hour, but in the wilderness, you can get that little bit more, such that you're going to say, if I want the best money, sure, I'm willing to sacrifice it because I'm going to deal with PvPers and so on if you want to do that. If you don't, you can still do all right. So what I want to do is make it so that, if you really don't like it, you don't feel screwed. And I'm kind of looking at collection log and pet gathering is kind of as an aside, because we're not talking the majority
Can I
of
play
players
devil's
there.
advocate, Kieren?
Yeah, go for it.
What if I really don't like training agility? It's the same thing, right? If I've got to get my agility levels up, so I've just got to get on with it. I mean, to be fair, I agree with you.
I don't like that. I don't want players to be doing content they don't find fun, because that's not good for the player. Yeah. I don't think that's good for us. Like, we want people to enjoy the game. We want people to stick around. So when I'm looking at agility, I want to introduce skilling methods for agility that are not awful. That are actually relatively good. Sepulchre helps that at the top end, right? So I don't want players to feel like they're directed to content that's that they don't personally enjoy or is bad in cases of like rat catchers or whatever. So it's so much more nuanced when it comes to the wilderness, though, because it is so much more subjective than simply, this is faster or slower. It's a bit of both. There's a lot of different trade-offs. How good are you at PvP versus not? I think what I'm also interested in is trying to get those sort of scales right. If you sort of see it as the prey on one side and the predator on the other side, how can you make that feel fair? More fair than it does right now. I'd say actually we do very little on both sides right now. There's not a huge amount of incentive for PvPers, really. How much are you really making? You're killing the people who've got a few dragon bones in their inventory. And for prey, if apart from world hopping, if you get attacked, you're basically dead in most cases, unless you really are trying to fight back. So I think if we can try and do more to really strengthen both sides of that, maybe we can get to a place where there is a healthier relationship, where dying doesn't just feel inevitable, but fair, and that feeling is less one that's negative, and more so that's like, okay, I understand that there's some things I could have done better to avoid dying. Like, I don't think that's easy for what it's worth. Like, I think these are genuinely, obviously, hard challenges. But, yeah. We're going to have inevitably a lot of discussions internally about it. I've already had a lot of discussions, and these aren't tricky. These aren't easy problems, because if they were easy, we'd have probably solved them already. That's part of it too. We're looking at wilderness bosses. These are going to be big topics when we look at those and how we fix those. Beyond just making them mechanically, not just safe spot them and attack them. How do we make them better? For this whole kind of predator prey mechanic or not. I could keep on chatting, but I feel like we've spent a lot of time talking about this, and really I think what we need to do is kind of agree what course of action we want to take and be able to actually start talking to players about how we are going to push forward with these other wilderness changes down the line. We're doing a PvP survey right now, and certainly some of the priorities you might want to see in the near future.
Before we move to the next question, I didn't really get a chance to finish what I was saying, Kieren, because I feel like you wanted to slow me down about my agility comment. Where I was leading with it was that if I don't like training agility, I have to like it or lump it, right? But ultimately, if everyone then started to feel like that, we would look to add alternate agility training methods that would then maybe entice those that wouldn't train it traditionally to train it in another way, similar to Runecraft with Gardens of the Rift, and now Giants Foundry with smithing. So maybe it's not a case of that we need to balance the chaos altar. Maybe that could stay how it is, but there could be an alternative incentive outside of it that is better than the current gilded altars, for example, that might be a little bit different from ensouled heads or the new demonic ash scattering, that then would take away that clear incentive that you say players have at the moment to go to the chaos altar because it is so darn good. I mean, as a whole, I think the chaos altar is pretty bad anyway. As you said, people don't make money from killing people there, and if you go there to die. You set yourself up with one invent, and that's your route, right, to reduce the amount that you lose. So as a general design, it's just awful all round. So I think that we should look to change that regardless, but maybe taking the incentives out with other design content would be better. So.
All right, thank you very much, guys. I'm sure that we could go on and on this topic, probably a whole stream in itself. Maybe we will have that. But yeah, if you haven't filled out the PvP survey, highly recommend to go and do that with !PvP. All right, on to a question about the future of Old School. Cautious Equipment 98 asked, where do you see Old School in 5 years' time? What would be some major long-term goals for the game as a whole moving forward?
These are questions we've been obviously talking about a lot ourselves, as we always do. And one of those things related to that was like, how open do we go with the player base about this? And we all kind of feel like this is a good thing to talk to players about. Like, where we want to take it old school, what's the long-term future. So, really, I guess what I want to say is just hold this space, and, you know, we should hope... I'm not going to promise soon, but it is something that we do want to talk to players about generally.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much, Kieren. All right. The next question. Oh.
Wait. Surely
Go on,
Todd and
Ayiza.
Bruno and myself have opinions on where they see old school in 5 years.
That is very true. Go on then. Who wants to take the floor?
5 raids and a new skill. That's all I want
Ooh,
in 5 years.
adventurous.
Daring today.
I want a
So
new-
safe.
I'd hope to see a new skill and some new continents, some more land to explore, with new stories, ending some old stories. That's what I want to see.
I like that. All right. I'm not going to be safe. I'm just going to throw it out there. I want to see like the equivalent of modding capabilities for RuneScape. I want people to be able to have their own servers that they make their own content on, that players can join on a world list just as they would any other, similar to how you join a leagues or a dead man or something like that. That's what I would love to see in the next 5 years.
A thriving
Right.
wilderness.
Yeah.
To follow up from the last conversation.
God, look! Don't you start tagging me in as the PvP mod now, Kieren. I get that enough as it is.
I was going to say, I feel like Reddit's
Mm.
already made that decision for you, Ayiza, but no. All right, cool. Well,
Need
thank
someone
you,
else to take
guys.
the torch.
All right, cool. The next question we have is, when do you anticipate Ironmen will be able to convert to unranked GIM?
Soon. I don't know if we had an exact date yet, but the work is fully in progress. We saw it all working today, so we're not talking far away. It's just a matter of when we can get it into a build, I think, and through testing.
Awesome stuff. All right, Wasting XP asked, with Tombs of a Mascot having an invocation system and the Game Jam Blue Inferno, like the Tascal Trials thing called the Blue Inferno, having modifiers, where does the team see these type of modifiers fitting into the future old school RuneScape?
Well-
I like them because it... Go ahead.
No, Bruno, I keep answering questions. You take it
Okay.
on.
I like them because it gives everyone, even if they're not at the highest skill level, a chance to do the same content, although they might not have the same experience because they might not have 20 different orbs coming at them at X time and stuff like that. They'll still kind of be able to get it. Similar thing with like the entry mode Theatre of Blood. You might not be able to do a solo hard mode top, but if you've done entry mode Theatre of Blood, at least you know what's going on, which is nice. So I personally like them.
I like them too. I think they're really interesting and offer like quite a lot of sort of replayability for Teams of a Mascot as well. You know, you can work your way up quite gradually if you're learning, and simultaneously the people like Wooks will inevitably try and do the raid with all of the invocations on. Something we're not exactly balancing it like that's going to be the norm. So, you know, it should be quite interesting. But I kind of see it's quite experimental still. We've not tried this sort of thing with a raid before. It's quite different. I'm hoping to see quite a lot of variety in how people set up their raids long term. If it very much becomes a defined meta, like use this one, and everyone's doing that, I don't think it'll have lived up to its potential. So I want to see how it goes. But I also think Blue Inferno or Tascal Trials is quite a different feature to a raid, and so they serve quite a different purpose in that content than they do to raids.
Yeah, I think it's like going back to what we was talking about skilling. It's that giving that option. Like, you know, you go into, let's say, TOA, you put on 3 invocations, you get good. Then you add another one and another one, until you've got, like, you know, you've done multiple tries of TOA, different variants and your different setups, and you're just going to keep coming back, hopefully. So, yeah, I think it's a good. The invocation system, I mean, especially from what I've seen, is a great thing. So hopefully we can continue to carry that on in some form. All right. Caneland96 asks, would it be possible to make stuff heads function like Boss Lair Jars and not to be lost when switching them out? For how rare they are, most of them sit in the bank since you lose them if you get a new one you want to display.
Why not?
This will go back to that one suggestion I heard in the Q&A like a while ago, where instead of having just a boss head place, you'll have like a boss head stand with like changeable heads. That'd be cool.
We tick every box. What if you can combine them with your rare fossils and make a different boss?
All right, good stuff. Yeah, maybe something we can look into eventually. I'm not going to promise any timings because the soon TM is coming back out. So. All right, we'll have a couple more questions before we get to the player creation stuff. Chambers of Xeric asks, now that other players can enter the POH of an iron, can you enable the feature to allow us to post bulletin advertisements so we can host?
I don't see why not. I don't imagine a lot of irons to use it, because I feel like the majority of people who do host their homes, for the most part, they're being nice, but it's also to get donations from people who use their homes. And Ironmen can't really take donations, so yeah, aside from that, I wouldn't really mind. And I don't imagine it to be too much work either.
Yeah, it seems a pretty harmless restriction to remove.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much, guys. All right, Matty XY8 asks, are there any plans to expand the history or the lore of the werewolves in Canifis, possibly a quest line to cure them? What makes you say they want to be cured?
Good
Do
point,
vampires want to be
Sarnie.
cured?
Maybe the quest can investigate that.
Yeah, I'm just saying, maybe they like being werewolves, like, you know.
No, honestly, the short answer is just no current plans. I don't know how much established lore there is on werewolves, if any. I'm sure there must be some, but yeah, it's just there's a huge list of the potential quest lines, and this maybe would be quite cool because we've not done anything with them.
All right, awesome stuff. Okay, we'll do two more questions. The first one, Alternative Age 2 asks, are there any plans to add Birdhouse seeds in packs to the game so Ironmen don't have to hopscape to get them?
Don't think there's plans, but this is something we've talked about a few times with Ironmen complaining about having to hop worlds to get seeds. At this point, it feels like one of those things where like I don't really mind if they just have seeds because it doesn't really make for good gameplay. But yeah,
I swear, if you just pick Bucket Master Farmer for like 2 hours, you have enough seeds to do
yeah.
this for a week, if not more. I mean, it's one of the. It's so minor, right, that it's negligible. But when does it get to the point of? I always sound like such a miserable mod. I apologize, everyone in chat. I really do. But where do we draw the line of like, okay, this is annoying because it's impossible for me to get them, and Shopscape is the only option versus I just don't want to play the game as much, and this is the easier way for me to be able to just go ahead and do it. Because there are options to get seeds, right? And it is so minor because it's like an hour or something of Master Farmer. I personally don't care. I wouldn't be bothered if we added seed packs. It probably would be a good idea. I'm more like thinking about the underlying of it, right? Are we just looking to make it easier for the sake of it? Or is it really that much of a problem that it causes so many Ironmen frustration on the daily?
I kind of share both points of view here. I'm like, Shopscape doesn't need to be tedious for the sake of it. But in an ideal world, we find alternative methods that are good and doable.
What if we took the seeds out of the shop?
Or instead, well, that or we could also just make it so that the amount of seeds dropped by master farmers is like more than like 3 or whatever the drop rate these days.
Yeah.
That way you still have the best of both worlds, but the tedious method, which is pickpocketing farmers, wouldn't be as tedious because you do it a lot faster.
We did that for something else, did we not? Quite. I know it wasn't with runes, but we made it so that you didn't have to buy them from the shop because doing the actual method was faster. I'm sure we've done it before, but I don't remember exactly what the change was.
Sand.
Um,
Sand is the big one.
Oh, sand would be a good
we
one.
did that
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sand.
that's it. Yeah. So I mean, I really like that, and the reason why I said like, oh, what if we removed seeds from the shop wasn't just in spite. It was what would players do if the seeds weren't in the shop, and the answer being they'd pickpocket master farmers. So if we just make seeds from master farmers a little bit better, then you wouldn't need to use the shop anyway, and we can still keep them in the shop as well, right?
Yeah, just literally buff the quantity of hop seeds that you get, right? Instead of getting like one at a time or whatever it is, just, you know, you could multiply that, but it's not going to harm anything. But encourage you to do a skilling method rather than use the shop.
Could increase the amount of hop seeds that regular farmers drop as well when you kill them.
You
So
could,
there's
but who's
an
going to kill
alternative,
farmers
yeah.
if they pickpocket them?
True, but you know, it's just an alternative way.
Yeah, I mean, we could make it good enough to actually make it viable as well. That's right, Tide.
No one's ever killed a farmer intentionally.
I was going to say
there's
those
no
poor
farmer slayer,
farmers.
but slayer tasks.
Maybe something to add if we go down that route, Bruno. All right, we'll have one more question before we do some player-created content. Kim GFL asks, what is the status of quest porting? Would love to see While Gothic Sleep and the Majorat storyline come soon.
There was a lot of good responses to the survey and a lot of support for porting for certain quests. Generally, I'd say if the quest was good, it's better for porting than if it wasn't as good. There's nothing in the schedule right this second. We're not working on this right this second, but this is one that obviously comes to the top of the list for a lot of people. It would love to see Wild Gothic Sleeps come to the game. It's such an iconic quest from back when it came out. No promises, but it's certainly something we might discuss at some point.
Yeah, looking back at the results, I believe that it's the most requested one. 88% positive. So there you go.
There you go.
All right, thank you very much, Kieren. All right, let's have a look at some player-created content quickly before we wrap up. We have the first one from Toki Orifia, Me Wise Old Man. Oh, that's cute. Oh, we seem to have lost.
We've lost Tide and Bruno.
Left
Tide.
See you guys. I'm clocking
Yeah.
out.
Become
6
one
PM.
with the little wise old man. There we go. Oh, we've got
Looks
one.
pretty cool.
It's a nice mask mat as well.
Very
Not
nice
biased.
mask
Not
mat.
biased. All right. The next one we have from fake Reddit account is a bodyguard of Zamarok's greatest general.
Nice.
That's brilliant.
Come on, it's not correct. The guy's not eating the shark whole.
Yeah, very true. Very true, Tide. Very true. All right. Simplicity is sometimes the best with these things. All right. We've got that dude 4647, title 4 of the 6.
Oh my god.
Wow.
Are they?
That's awesome.
They're not. They're
Oh
not
my
posable,
God.
are they? Because that would be amazing. But
If you squint, it almost looks like it's just four actual real people.
That's what I was thinking.
It looks so realistic.
So I was like, is that 4 people
That's
cosplaying? Or it's just the perspective?
To be fair, the quality on it does make it seem like it's just been ran through paint a few times, resized, and it's just people getting ready to go to Comic-Con. They're amazingly detailed. That's incredible. I think those are definitely some of the best player kind of statues that I've seen, for sure.
yeah, I want to see the other two now. Where's the other
They
two?
remind me of like WrestleMania figurines that I used to have when I was a kid.
You talking about like the movable ones that were like kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
half
yeah.
cheap, but yeah, I know the ones. All right. Next up, we have a Barrows T-shirt from Madness 3869.
Ooh,
Wicked.
Very cool.
old school merch team, take note.
Yeah.
I'd
That's
get
so
that.
cool.
I'd buy that.
I really love the way that they used the font for Barrows as well. It kind of really matches with the pink brothers.
Mm.
Like a band T-shirt, for sure.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
going to say, Kieren, this is like a T-shirt you'd be wearing to a rock concert or a metal concert. Sorry.
Put some significant old school dates on the back. It's sorted, I think. And then finally, we have a rug for everyone's favorite skill from Singado Phoenix.
Ooh.
Sounds like
Very
a good
cool.
place to wipe your feet after you've been for a run in the mud.
Jeez, Bruno.
Not
No
anymore. Not anymore. God, use the rifters here. I'll
Yeah,
hang that up and worship this rug. Lovely rug. Yeah.
I'd
Yeah,
want
it's
them
here,
to
but
one
like
with,
still.
what do we get? Get one with mining on it. I'll wipe my feet on that one.
Yeah, and,
Yeah,
and
same.
me. Oh, sorry, mine's
Yeah.
agility now, isn't it?
Yeah, I was gonna say. I'd
To be
want
fair,
one
I
of the
do need a
pet.
new rug for our living room. It's nearly done now, so I may have to sling a DM.
All
Into an
right,
agreement.
all right. Awesome stuff. All right, well, that is it for this week's Q&A. That is a wrap. I hope you guys have enjoyed yourselves. Thank you very much to all of you for watching. We're just going to quickly go through some announcements before we say goodbye. Exclamation mark game update. We've listened to your feedback and added some quality of life updates to Giants Foundry. You can find all of the changes on our game update news post. Exclamation mark game modes. Have your say on the future of old school RuneScape. Tell us your thoughts on different game modes, their frequency, and what type of game modes you want us to explore. Exclamation mark PvP. Our dedicated PvP team will be moving on to reworking the wilderness bosses, but what's next for PvP? Well, that's where you come in. We'd like your help to shape the future of PvP in old school RuneScape. I can see you smirking, Ayiza. We really want to gain a better understanding of where we think we should focus our efforts, to make sure to use that command or more. And if you missed last week's stream, we have a handy transcript ready so you can catch up with exclamation mark transcript. All right, with that said, thank you very much to... Go on, Ayiza.
I thought I was being really clever, right? By miming or mouthing the announcements from the script. And then I remember that there's a delay. So my mouth's just been moving completely out of sync with your voice. And I look like even more of an idiot than I did at the start of the stream. So
It
that's
was
what I was
brilliant 'cause
doing, chat.
I could see it from the corner of my eye. Like, the script is here and you're here. So I could just see you, like,
Yeah, I
completely out of
tried.
time. All right, yeah, thank you very much to Modspear behind the scenes, doing everything production. Thank you to all the mods in chat for helping out there. And thank you very much to Mods Ayiza, Kieren, Bruno, and Tide for joining me today. Is there any last words from any of you before we wrap up?
You'll have an ice cream now. Cool down.
Time to buy an AC unit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
definitely.
I'll just say to everyone, enjoy the rest of your evening, and maybe you'll make some fantastic gains. Hopefully, you get that drop that you've been aspiring to get. You have been blessed. There you go.
Ayiza has blessed you. All right. Good luck with RNG, everyone. I've been your host, Mod Sarnie, and we will see you in the next one. Goodbye.